Hey people, it's TL Gamer here, and I know I said the class was going to start at about 10:30, but I'm still going to give people a little bit of time to get in here in case, there's people running late or they got the information on the stream a little later or things like that. So what I'm going to wind up doing is, giving people about 5, 10 more minutes, and then I'm actually going to start the class. And I'll be going over some basic global rules and things like that. Not for stream chat or anything else, but just to what to expect. And I always try to promote safe streaming, things like that. So I'm going to wait for a couple people to get in here, and then I'll start. So right now it's about 10:32 my time. So about 10:40 I will start, or 10:45 to be on the safe side. So I'll start 10:45, and then that's it. I do have a friend of mine coming over, so I have to get the door for him when he comes up, and that's about it. So that being said, I'm going to just wait. And I'm actually going to do a quick test on this real fast to see how this works. Yep, into my oatmeal. as I said, about 7 more minutes before I start. Again, that'll give people time to, you know, excuse me, that'll give people time to get in, set up, get registered, whatever, sign in, do whatever. I'm making coffee right now, so I gotta wait for that. So like I said, about 5 more minutes. So just hang tight and I'll be back. So now class is going to start. That's going to be it. So, here we go. Okay, the first couple of things that I'm going to go over is that since I promote safe streaming, there's going to be a break given every, every hour or so. This stream's going to run till about at least 3 hours, so approximately about 2:30 or somewhere in between there. So every hour I'll take like a 5-minute break, 5 or 6 minute break to give yourself a rest, give your eyes a rest, things like that. And so what I'm going to first explain is that you have to understand how the game works, and you have to understand what's going on, because once you understand that, you can have an easier time not only creating the mods, but you have an easier time also if something goes wrong with the mod that you have, it'll be able to fix it. So that's the first thing. So a brief explanation on how Skyrim was programmed is necessary for me to go on with this. So I'll begin by explaining ZeniMax Media Online. I'm sorry, ZeniMax Media is the one who made the game. Bethesda published it. And so when people say, oh, Bethesda made Skyrim, no, they actually published it. ZeniMax Media made it. So the way they did the game is they set up a consequence system in the game. So when you do something in the game, you're responsible for the actions. You can't go undo it. And they did this because this is the first RPG of its nature to actually have that type of system in it. So, for example, when you have a quest you can't turn in because you killed the NPC, it's a consequence you have to make for your actions. Hey, how's it going, buddy? Welcome to the stream. I just started the class a minute ago, so if you want to log in or whatever it is, if you want to follow along with this, I can wait a second. But other than that, I'm just going to keep going. But if you want to, like I said, just type in the chat and let me know, because this is going to be a minimal of at least 3 hours. So I just went over some things real fast. So I'll wait to see if you want to log in or whatever it is and follow along. But in the meantime, basically, as I was explaining, Bethesda made a consequence system with this. And again, if you kill an NPC through a quest that you have, if you kill an NPC for a quest you have to turn in, if you have to turn in a quest to an NPC that you killed, the consequence of your action is you can't get that out of your journal. That's the way it is. Now, what happens when gamers can't get their way with this game is that they immediately start saying the game's glitched or whatever else it is, but that's not correct, because that's just the consequence system. They just chose not to like it. So if you kill an NPC that you have to turn a quest into, you shouldn't be able to get it out of your journal. Do I agree that there should have been some unfinished quest ability or section of your journal? Yeah, but that's not quite the same thing as not being able to actually turn it in. Yes, it's an unfinished quest, but the fact is it's not unfinished because you didn't feel like not finishing it. You actually didn't finish it because you can't finish it. So in that regard, it's a consequence. Same thing with the drum from the Bard's College. Immediately people started saying, because they could get the other instruments out of their inventory, that this one should have also been removed. Says who? That was just a gamer preference, so they immediately started saying it's a glitch, it's a bug. So there's a lot of things in Skyrim, and it's not just Skyrim's Special Edition or Enhanced Edition or Legendary or whatever you want to call it, 5-point Blu-ray VR. Sorry, that was bad. But anyway, the point is that if you have the consequence system is why people started saying that there was a bunch of glitches or bugs inside the game. So that's the first thing you have to understand about the game when you're making mods. That not everything is a bug. Just because you can't do something, or just because a player can't do something, doesn't mean it's broken. It just means that's the way Bethesda, ZeniMax Media programmed it. So no, you shouldn't be able to get the drum out of your inventory because it's what the game denotes as you being part of the Bard's College. Now again, that resorts back to quests. If you kill an NPC you have to turn a quest into, why should you be able to get it out of your journal? That's the consequence you have to deal with when, living with it. You have to live with the consequences. If you break your leg crossing the highway, you can't undo that, and your leg will never heal the same. So, this is just gamer preference. So that's the first thing you need to understand. The second thing is what I said earlier is knowing all of this information will not only help you be able to understand how to create mods, but it will actually allow you to be able to fix something should something go wrong, or if you download a mod, how to basically almost pinpoint where the problem may or may not be. So that brings me to the next thing on why console commands break the game. Console commands break the game because what happens is they skip over triggers. Yeah, I'll be going over that in this. Triggers can have numerous effects and numerous consequences even an hour later into the game. So let's say you have to talk to an NPC. Now, in that NPC's trigger, in order to be able to talk to them, let's say, was something that would have to happen in Storm. I can't remember the first city, but we'll say Ebonheart. Okay. What happens is if an NPC needed to do something in Ebonheart in order to trigger him to be able to, or trigger them to be able to show up where you need to talk to them in, let's say, the Fighters Guild. That's not going to happen because the trigger for the NPC was never met. Now, you have no idea what NPCs or what anything is the triggers are connected to, so you could be skipping tons of triggers and never even know that. Once you use a console command, you basically break the game. You have to assume you've broken the game completely in all aspects, even if you never see the problem. That brings me to the point of people saying, I've never had a problem with a mod. Just because you've never had a problem with a mod does not mean the problem doesn't exist. It just means you never ran into it, which explains why some people run into them and some people don't. Now, let's say, for example, the problem for the mod is on the Imperial side, but somebody made the mod so it only does something with the Stormcloaks. You'll never see the problem because it's on the Imperial side and you join the Stormcloaks. But that doesn't mean the problem doesn't exist. That just means you didn't run into it. Furthermore, if you actually go and you do something on the Imperial side, you still may never see it simply because of the way the triggers and everything else and certain circumstances that lead up to it. So again, you could still be on the right side of where the problem is and still never see it for those particular reasons. So that being said, if you understand that the consequence system in the game is how they put it together, you understand what the game really can and can't do, or what you should and shouldn't be able to do in that regard. Now, that doesn't always mean there's going to be an issue with that, but by having this information ahead of time, you will know that should something go wrong, you know one of the things to look at, and I'll be going over where those things might be, and to show you how these things are interconnected. Now, when you're adding something to the game, you can actually break the game simply by a box. If you put a box in the wrong slot and an NPC has to walk by that area and the box is blocking him, you can just screw up the entire trigger line if they have anything. You just don't know. So that's why you have to be extremely careful when making mods, and you have to understand why what I'm saying is important for you to understand the modding process as well. Now, we get into the looking up things online on how to do things. Okay, modding, some mods require scripting. That's a pain in the ass to do because not everybody knows coding. Now, most people at this time will tell you to either go to the wiki or something like that, and it will teach you scripting, and that is absolutely false. The Papyrus Wiki is actually a reference point for people who already know how to script. It will never teach you how to actually script. Furthermore, if you run into a problem following stuff that people put out, you can still run into problems, and then you'll never know how to fix it because people never actually address what would happen if something does go wrong, so you are actually stuck. So, case in point, I tried to do the Hello World scripting aspect, and for some reason it wouldn't work, no matter what it is that I did. I even made a video showing precisely, I followed every single step, and it still never worked. And so, no matter what it is that I did, it wouldn't work, and I couldn't find an answer to how to get it to work or what the problem was. And there was no answer I could find anywhere. So looking things up isn't always helpful either. Case in point, when you learn, if you're doing rendering or modeling, you need to know how to do, you need to know how to use things such as 3ds Max and stuff like that. That's what most people use. Excuse me for 1 second. I got to go get the doors. My friend was here, and I said that. I will be right back. So as I said, my phone was over, so I had to answer the door. Alright, so anyway, the as I was saying, you know, looking stuff up online isn't going to actually help you, because if you run into a problem, the solution to the problem isn't actually factored into, you know, the equation here. So like I said, I was trying to do the Hello World script and it didn't work. And so I couldn't find an answer to what went wrong. And usually when you have people saying, you know, I'm going to teach you how to do this mod, and the mod involves scripting, then they don't go over the scripting part of it, or at least tell you that, you know, up front you need to know scripting, then they actually haven't taught you how to do the mod, because the thing revolves around scripting. That brings me into the following tools, like Skyrim Script Extender and you know, Boss and Wiry Bash and things like that. Those are absolutely unnecessary, with the exception of the Skyrim Script Extender. The Script Extender is mainly used for getting keybinds to show up on the screen if you wanted like C or V, or, you know, to change the keybinds around. But mainly what the Script Extender does is it extends a script off of a mod, so it will run the mod with the extended script. It basically, let's say the mod is A, the script is B, and the script extender is C. All C does is take A and B and allow it to run together with an extension. That brings me to the point on why it's not needed, because if you know how to script, you can actually script into the mod itself and annihilate the use of the script extender, unless you're going to do keybinds or certain things like that. So that's about the extent of why you need to know why the game is has a consequence system. So when you're doing your mods and things like that, you'll know how to address what possibly could go wrong, not just in your own mods, but when you download them. So that being said, I'm now going to show you how to set up the creation kit for use. So the first thing you're going to need to do is go into the directory of where the creation kit itself is, which I have to actually find right now, so give me a minute. My desktop is a mess, you'll have to excuse it. Alright, so here we go. Alright, so the first thing you're going to need to do is you need to be able to get the entire creation kit to load any ESM files and anything else you want to do, which I'll go over what ESM and ESP actually means and how they work and stuff like that, so you know what you're looking at. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to put these two. You open up the creationkit.ini in the directory where you install the creation kit, and you have to go under general and add these two lines. They actually don't exist. So it's right here, I'll let you see it. And then there's another one that you have to do. Well, you don't have to do it, but it's a lot easier to do. When you do messages, what happens is if you try to load some of these creation kit, you'll get a bunch of error rendering messages. Those are normal simply because the creation kit that ZeniMax released is not the same exact creation kit that they actually have in the studio. So what they did was there's certain things that they didn't add in, and when the creation kit tries to load it, it gives you an error message saying that piece is missing. It's not that it's broken, it's just there's no reason, they for some reason didn't add it in, and that's the reason for the error messages in that regard. They're mainly rendering and texture things and stuff like that that would never actually put in for some stupid reason. So those are the first two things you want to put in there, because if you don't, you'll just be you'll be clicking okay to all, and it'll just take forever to load the damn thing. So it's this again. It's block messages. It's actually you might have to actually add this line in. I can't remember whether or not this is done. So what you want to do is you want to do this. Add the blocked messages, or if it's in there and it's 0, just make it to 1. And then again, you want to put allow multiple master files to load, and then a multiple master loads. That's basically what it says. So now there's one other thing that you have to do, and that is down in here. You have to add this crap in there too. So what I'll do is, to make things easier, in the description below the video, I will just copy this stuff and leave it in there. And so that way you can just copy and paste it directly in. So all you would have to do is go to where archive is and then just copy and paste that whole thing over. Then what you do is you save it and close it. Now, when you load these in, this is going to take a bit. You go up to the file here and you load these in. And so without those edits to the ini, you're not going to be able to load all of these. Now, I'll be explaining this, well, how this works in general, just so you know what you're looking at when you're loading things in. Alright, so what you have is a .esm file, and that stands for Elder Scrolls Master File of whatever it is that they did. So for example, this is the main Elder Scrolls Master File before Dawnguard, Hearthfire, and Dragonborn was actually put into the game. And then there was an update, Elder Scrolls Master File. When Dawnguard came out, they actually added the Dawnguard, Hearthfire, and Dragonborn. So those are the master files that run those games. Those are locked and can never be edited. The reason, that's the reason when you create a mod, it turns it into a .esp, which stands for Elder Scrolls Plugin File. And how this works basically is, picture a master file and an ESP running side by side. The ESP that you've created is taken from the information from the master file, and that section in the master file that you edited becomes a plugin. So when you run it through the game is programmed to take any ESPs and override parts of the master file while running the master file. So in other words, it tricks the game into thinking the ESP is now part of the master file, and that master file has been edited where the ESP is. The reason you can't edit the actual ESM itself, because if you make a mistake, you just basically broke the game. So they do it in the form of ESPs, and so you can never wind up actually messing with the files unless you find a way to unlock it, which I don't recommend, but whatever. And so you'll also find a bunch of videos on how to I'm assuming you can find a bunch of videos on how to blend these together as one big gigantic ESM file, and I wouldn't advise doing that, because again, you're dealing with an edit, a player edit that wasn't done by Bethesda or ZeniMax or whatever company it is, you know, and that's just for future reference in general. You don't want to mess around with the way these companies do things, because the companies have access to this stuff, you do not, and so they know exactly how it should and shouldn't be put together. Even if you know everything inside and out, it's not advisable. And so that's basically how this works. So anything checked off in here is going to run as it goes in. Now, what you have is set as active file. Those apply basically to the ESPs themselves. Because what the active file is that when you load it into the creation kit, it's the actual file or the mod that you're currently working on. You can have 15 mods loaded into the creation kit to take the data from them all. But what winds up happening is the one that's set as active is the actual one that you're going to wind up editing. So that's just what set as active file means. And so you notice you can't actually edit a master file, because like I said, you can't edit the files themselves. You can only edit ESPs. Now, the other thing is when you're running these mods through the creation kit, just to let you know that if you actually read the terms of service, when you upload a mod to the internet, it's no longer yours. It belongs to the video game company that made it, and that's with anything. Even if the video game company gives you permission to have it, it's still under you know, terms of service belongs to them. And the main reason for the creation kit, if you actually read through the terms of service and why they released it, isn't actually to make mods for the community, even though that's what winds up happening. The actual reason for the creation kit was for you personally to extend your own game experience, and that's exactly what this is for. So just to give a couple tidbits, that half of the stuff that's on the Nexus about, you know, it's yours or whatever it is, even if you make the mod from scratch, once you upload it to the net, it literally belongs to the game company, so it's not yours to say I can't do anything with. Furthermore, it's copyrighted material already, because you're making it out of copyright material, so you can't copyright an already copyrighted piece of material, which is the main reason why it doesn't work that way. But more so, you've already agreed when you're using it. This is all the stuff that you don't read. And so, because it takes their game to run, it takes their engine, it's their parts. Even if you were to model an entire thing from scratch with 3ds Max, it's still not yours, because you're actually now making it part of the game. That's not what I'm sure, you know, Bethesda is pretty lenient on it, but that's how it is under law. So just to let you know, at least in the United States. So now that that's cleared up, Once you get all these set up and you get the ini file set up to load, you can wind up loading into the creation kit itself. And from there, I'll go over what these windows are and things like that. But as one thing I should have explained first is how to set the windows up. And so basically what you see here is you want the render window bigger than the other two windows, the object window and then the cell view window, which I'll go over once the creation kit's loaded. But I just wanted to give you a couple pieces of information with that first to help you out with that. So I'm going to go ahead and load this. And it's going to take a while for this to load. Oh shit, my creation kit stopped working. That's freaking hilarious. Well, let me try this again. Alright. My creation kit locked. That's hilarious, dude. I guess I shouldn't have left it out that long, huh? Yeah, right. My friend said this is mayonnaise in the sun. I shouldn't have left it out that long. That's funny. Oh man, that's terrible. Mayonnaise in the sun. That's terrible. Where'd you get that from? No. Did it really? Did they really do that? Oh, that's funny. That is funny. Alright, so let's try this again. That wasn't good. That's what I call this is not good, Mikey. This is not good at all. I have no idea why that crashed. That'd be funny if it crashed again. There it goes. I don't know what that was about. Like, the freaking thing crashed. See, here I am telling you how to get all the error messages off, and then the whole thing just crashed. Oh, man. So while we're waiting for this loading, it's Windows. The Matrix runs on Windows XP, man. loading. The time is going up, but the downloads are slowing down. Oh man, that's just not right. Something's wrong with this. If you look down here, it says like loading 71%, 73. Oh, it's loading in Dawnguard now. I feel special. Special. S-P-E-C-H-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-L. Special. I wear a helmet. Huh? Oh, yeah. I cannot. I'm using a different rendering software because I can't freaking figure out how to get this to work the way it is on this. It's like friggin' the audio is all fucked up on this. Oh, I see you. I see you. My friend decided to watch me. Give me a view. I think it's 15. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention you want to put this in 1080p. Go to the settings, otherwise it's going to look like pure shit. This is nice and long. Look at this. Initializing references. I have no idea what that means. Oh man. This is the shop owner cup, by the way, because it's got a sign on it. I'm the shop owner. We have another one that's not a shop owner cup. Oh my gosh. I've told you this takes a while because this is the special edition. The special edition with helmets. What's funny is people don't even realize it's funny how many, if you actually look at how many Skyrim editions that came out, there was like the first game, fine, then there was like the DLC. Then there was the Legendary Edition, Then there was the Skyrim Enhanced Edition, and yeah, then there's, I don't even know what the hell it is, special Blu-ray virtual edition with fucking director's cut commentary. But anyway, the what's funny is the first game that came out, there was some HD packs that went with it, so it pretty much doubled the system requirements to run it. So only people that had like a really high-end computer could run it all. And what's funny is the special edition, the HD special edition of Skyrim was nothing more than the game re-released with those three edits, those three HD texture packs over them. That's all it is. Now, when the special edition came out, the like the special edition, that actually they edited some quests and fixed some things that shouldn't have been going on, but they still haven't fixed the friggin' damn dragons. How many dragons do you friggin' need in the game? Like, seriously. That's why some of the mods that somebody came out with was interesting about spending dragon breath shouts or whatever the fuck it is for on points inside your game here. See, as you can see, there's all these warnings that still pop up, but if you didn't edit the ini file, you would have been closing these things consistently. So let me clear that and exit this. All right, so the first thing I'm going to explain is that this is your render window, as I said. You want this render window. I can speak. So what you do is this render window is where everything is going to be taking place when you're actually seeing what you're putting into the game and things like that. And I'll go over the keybinds that because that's actually important. All right, so anyway, the object window are objects in the world. An object can be anything. Horses, rocks, trees, anything that's in the game is basically an object. And then the cell view window is the window, they're called cells. They're basically individual areas. So basically that's the area view of where those objects would be in there. And each one, as you can see, it's a huge, huge list. And there you'll see that there's actually interior worlds, and then on the drop-down list, there's actually exterior as well. And so when you're looking at these, if you take a look at, let's say, Whiterun World. Whiterun is actually an interior area. It's not exterior, even though there's a sky above it. It's literally what they did was they made lighting and made it look like it's open, but what happens is it's literally a giant indoor building, and that just gives off the illusion that it's actually an exterior area. It's not. It's actually interior. It's kind of weird. That's kind of makes no sense, but it does. So if you look at the interior here, if you look, you'll see that there's down here. Let me see. Edit. So Winterhold. See if I can find it. GH. See, Whiterun. If you look at the Whiterun stable, that's actually on an interior area. That's because it's inside an area. So I can't explain it any better than that. Okay, so first thing you're going to need to do is, let's say you accidentally close this window. How do you get that back? If you go to View and you go to Object Window, you can pop it back open. So that would be one thing. Now, you can actually have multiple object windows open and multiple view windows open at the same time. So if I go open in a secondary object window. Hey, how's it going, man? Is that you? Is that you? Or is that somebody else, man? Okay. I don't know. So I forget how to freaking get. Hold on a second. Preview window, show hide window. That's not it. Close that. So. Okay, so it's duplicate the window. You can actually have multiple. You can have multiple windows open at the same time. Create new object window. There we go. If you right-click on these, you can actually create new. I don't know if you can do it with these, but you can actually create new multiple object windows, and that makes it easier when you're editing things like that. So you can go back and forth on two different object windows without having to scroll back and forth through the list. The list of hotkeys that are actually helpful in this is under Edit, and then you go to Render Window Hotkeys. This will give you every single hotkey that's in the game, that's in here, and it's really, really useful for like duplicating items and things like that and moving things around. So those are the first couple of things that we're going to do. Next, I'm going to explain to you how to move around inside the render window once it's done. And the reason for that is because if you don't understand what you're doing, you can literally mess something up without even realizing you do it, because sometimes you can't see. And I'll show you what to do in case you somehow go outside the bounds of the render window, which will make sense in a bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is load in. I usually use Whiterun for this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Whiterun World. And as you can see, these are all the things in this particular cell. So the world space is Skyrim. The place in that world space is Whiterun. So they would use Whiterun as an actual cell. Cell is a subsection of it. So let's see here. I'm going to go to the Skyforge, Whiterun Origin. Now, if you actually take a look, it's not just, it's an area within an area within an area, and then there's objects in each one of those areas. So, for example, if you go to Whiterun Origin, this basically means it puts you outside of Whiterun. And these are all the things outside. This is the baseline of where it is. So let's say you wanted to find a barrel. How you would get these into the render window, or how you get it to show up over here, is in the cell view window. You double click this and it would load in. As you can see, there's a bunch of error messages. Okay, so once these are all loaded in, this is the barrel that I chose. And to understand the render window movements, the first thing you want to do is use your mouse wheel to zoom out. This is going to keep doing this. Here. So, before the special edition, this stuff never kept popping up. So that's the, if you keep backing it up all the way, you'll start to see that this is actually a really big mess. And you can see like everything that's happening in here. Now all of these yellow things you see, these red, the green, the blue, and everything else, those are markers for events and things like that on where things start, where they end. And those are all also attached to scripts. So that's why it's very important you don't understand, that you know enough not to move any of this stuff. See, this is still rendering, so what it's doing is, again, these are all the warnings and error messages that would have popped up that you would have had to keep closing. So, alright, so first thing you want to do, now it's completely loaded in. So, once it turns this color, it's loaded in completely. So now, the baselines of moving stuff, first you want to do is get rid of all the markers. So the hotkey for that is M. It shuts off everything and you don't have to worry about it. So now you can just freely look around without having to worry about anything. If you should mess something up, like let's say you did something like that and you accidentally moved it. Alright, see I just moved that? These are your redo and your undo keys are your best friend in this, because if you don't do that, you're going to get so screwed. Alright, so make sure you always go back enough times to do that. So now it just puts it back wherever you did, where it was originally. And so now what you do is, by clicking in the middle mouse button and holding it down, you can actually move it side to side or up and down. Not back and forth, it's up and down. So when you move the mouse forward, it basically lowers the camera. When you move it back, it raises the camera. So left and right also move the camera. Move it left and right. Alright, so now mouse wheel zooms in, mouse wheel forward zooms in, mouse wheels back, rolled back zooms out. Now, the easiest way to get to something is to look over here where you are, and then find out where in here you want this. So let's say you wanted to go back to that barrel. You double click it and you'll be brought right back to that barrel. So that's where it is. And if you wanted to see exactly where it is, you want to zoom out, it'd be right there. Now, how do you turn this? This is a little bit different, and this is where things get tricky. First off, I suggest that when you're turning the camera, you want to click on just anything, just something. Because if you do not, what happens is you can rotate the camera and wind up going outside the scope of where whatever you're modding. So in this particular case, I will have choose to click on a barrel here. It's easier to click over here actually. Okay, so now I'm on that barrel. So now when you what you do is when you want to rotate the camera, you hold shift. And then that'll allow you, when you move the mouse, to actually move the camera without disrupting where everything is. So now, if you roll out, zoom out, let's say, because you're over there, you can actually rotate it like this. So now, if I didn't have that, I'll show you what would happen. If I didn't click on that, and I clicked on, let's say, outside of here, I just moved the camera by holding shift. You have no idea where that is. You're like all messed up now. So you got to be careful, and that's why I very specifically and very carefully say, always make sure that you click on something so you have control of where you are. Now, let's say, for example, you drop something below the level of where you want it to be. There's a way to do that, and I'll go over that hotkey in a minute. The easiest thing to do is to click on a barrel and then hit T. T is, let me see, go back to barrel. T stands for top, and it'll bring it from top down view. So now that's the top of the barrel. I'm actually on top of it. If you're up in the air like that, it will be like showing that, but that's the top of it. So as you can see, I'm literally like right on top. So if you, so as you can see, I kind of like lost it. So if you hit T again, it'll bring you right back to where it was. So I'm going to actually undo this real fast here. Okay, so now, that's the baseline of how you do things in this. Now, if you want to copy something, you hit Control D, which duplicates it, and then you can actually multiply them. And to multiply multiple things, you can actually, it's like a mouse cursor. You can drag and drop it, or you can click on them individually by holding Control. It's exactly the same thing as you would on your desktop. So now when you actually, whatever you have highlighted, you can move all of them, and you can rotate them. So if you hold right click while something's highlighted, it will actually rotate it. And you move the mouse back and forth, it will rotate it. And if you hold left click and do it, it'll actually allow you to move the item itself. Back, forward, back, forward, side, side. And then, I think it's shift. There's a cow. Moo. So now I'm just going to go back and do this, undo everything here. So it's back to the way it was. All right. Now, whatever you have highlighted, will allow you to not just duplicate what's highlighted, but you can do multiple things. So basically what you do is once you have these the way you want them, let me see. These are tough. My suggestion to you is, because there's so much stuff involved in here, is to zoom in to zoom in as close to the object as you can, because you don't know what you're clicking on in the background. That's why I'm having a little problem with this. So now I have both of those, and if I want to Control duplicate, I can copy those and then paste them there. So this, again, it works exactly like a computer in that regard, Control. Go back here. So that's that on those movement keys and everything else. So that's the baseline of that, and how to move around and things like that. So now, if you wanted to utilize this, what happens is these bring up the object window reference, and these are where you can fine-tune specifics on where you want certain things, stuff like that. So whether you want the object persistent and whatever. And so persistent means it's constant, means it can't be moved, can't be touched, or if you remove it, let's say you pick a berry off of or let's say you pick an herb. Persistent means it'll actually come back because it's a constant thing happening in the world. That's the terminology, persistent. There's also another thing I forgot to mention about the when you're loading in the master files. Any ESM that you make an extension with, such as Dawnguard, Hearthfire, Dragonborn, when you load these in, basically what it does is it takes the data from all of these and places it into this. So no matter, you can basically you have more access to more things when you're making a mod. Different lighting, different areas. You have access to different shouts that you may not have in the main game. Just random things that are not part of the normal game, and then it gives you the data to be able to use those mods. However, the thing that you have to watch out for is that if you make a mod with, let's say, Dawnguard, the mod now has a dependency of Dawnguard. You'll hear the word dependency. Dependency means the mod requires, it's dependent on whatever you make it with. So if you make a mod with Dragonborn, Hearthfire, and Dawnguard, the mod dependency, it's dependent on having those present. So when you upload a mod for people to use, make sure that you state exactly what you have done, what you made the mod with, so that way people know they have to have those, or the mod's not going to function because it has data from every one of those. So for example, over in Solstheim is the only place you can get snow. So if you have a weather mod that requires snow, or put snow in the game, you can't put snow in the game in Skyrim without being in Solstheim. So that would be, I think that would be the Dragonborn DLC, because that's where that is. So it would literally, you can't just have weather patterns in the game like that unless you actually break apart the system and reprogram it or anything else. So again, make sure when you're uploading these mods, whatever you made the mod with, you have to make sure that the person knows, say, this requires Dragonborn or whatever. So just be aware of that. So now, that being said, I'm going to start going over some of the ways that everything works in this, as how it's put together, and you'll start to see everything that I said at the beginning of the video. So let's start off by doing an actor here. So actors are anything in the game. Usually when I tell people to do this, I usually tell them to make sure that all is checked off. So when you're doing it, it pulls up every bit of it in the entire game. Alright. Oh, by the way, the search area, if you wanted to find barrel. Let me see here. This is a window I forgot to mention. That if you want something specific without having to do all that, this will, whatever word you type in here will eliminate anything extra that doesn't belong here. Sorry, I had to fix that. Alright, so anyway, what you're doing is this is a way for you to find what you're looking for very much quicker. And so now, and you can put up anything with B, and it'll pull up anything with B in it. If you pull up, if you set F, it'll pull up anything with F. I don't think there's anything with Z in this. Oh yeah, it'll pull up anything with the letters in it. So, that's a fast reference window there. Alright, so now we're going to go to actors, and let's see actor. Anything in this game can be an actor. A horse, any AI is an actor. So let's say, for example, you want to do actor. I don't know. Let's try doing, I don't know, Breton. Let's load this in. As you can see, the windows come off of windows, come off of windows, come off of windows. So when you hear race, Alduin race, that's just basically the race that they put in the game, which is weird, so I'll go over that afterwards, because they all connect. So let me see here. Let's say you wanted to do, let's just do something everybody knows. Let's look up Breton. So let's do a Breton race, let's do a Breton male, and let's do, we'll just do Aldebar, whatever his name is. Okay, so what you're looking at here is the whole window for how this works. So I'm going to break down these windows, and I'm going to break down these tabs for you to understand how they work and why it's important for you to understand this is the first step of not breaking mods, or if something goes wrong, what's going wrong with this, because everything I'm going over in this usually doesn't, this is stuff that isn't gone over in the video, because most people don't attack these issues, and so that's exactly what I'm going to wind up doing. Okay, the ID is the ID inside the creation kit. The reason why you name it like that is because it has to be unique from anything else. You can't use the same name under this, or the same exact name. It's like trying to put two files inside the computer. It'll tell you that name already exists and won't let you do it. But more importantly, it's how you identify, or it's how the creation kit identifies what this exact NPC is. The name is the actual name of the NPC you see in the game, over their head, or whatever, wherever they have it set. These are all the excess pieces of data, like for example, that when you check off, it's a unique NPC, and as you can see, they can die because there's nothing preventing them from being, from dying. So you'd have to do to make them not dead is check that off as invulnerable. All right. These are the scripts which you can actually add, which is a real pain in the ass, because again, you'd have to know exactly how the scripting works and everything else. And I'm not familiar with scripting, so it's not something I can actually teach you. Alright, so now what we do is we go over the actor base itself. The actor base is basically the model for the character, and it's the baseline of what the character looks like and how it acts and everything else, and what you see in the game. Let's say N is none. Let me see, none. I forget how to do this. Oh, you know what? It's actually space N. That's right. It's actually space N, my bad. So that basically puts it back to normal way it is. So if you wanted to get to the top of it and not have any actor base, that's fine. And here is, and down below, you can't check any of these off until they have a very specific actor base. So for example, let's do this. You'd be able to check these off because they use this particular person, this particular NPC in the game uses something very specific. So you'd be able to check all that off. So in the meantime, just hit space, and then that'll be bring it back up there. But this is, it says use the spell list, and then you can put a spell list to them and everything else, which I'll get into afterwards. You can tell them to use a very specific script, and then, you put it in there, and then you click add the script, and then you'd say use the script. That's the baseline of how this works. Use factions. That means if they're friendly with it, it would use whatever faction basis that is programmed into the game, things like that. Again, now what you do is you get into the very specifics. This is all the very specifics on how these, and this is the baseline of the generic of what the actor is, what it does, what it looks like, and how it behaves. And these are all the actual traits where the behaviors and, would they follow along something, the nav mesh and everything else. Nav mesh, by the way, is navigational mesh, and it's basically not only allows the NPCs to not fall through the programming. So if you have an NPC, if there was no nav mesh, they'd just fall right through the programming. Plus, nav mesh is navigational, so what would happen is you can script an NPC to walk a very specific place using the nav mesh, and that's why these get really intricate. And now as you're starting to see why I said you have to understand how the game works before you make a mod, or you're just going to wind up having a bunch of problems, and then you'll wind up having clashes and crashes and everything else. Hey, I rhymed. So anyway, now we go into the race. This is pre-programmed in a separate section. There's a separate section of the game where, in the editor, that has all of these things. So if you want to make a race, you'd first have to back up and go to where that race is, and then once you create an actor, that race would show up on this list, provided you did it correctly, and which I'll get into in a minute, because I'll get into a little bit later, because this follows the spell casting system, which I'll go over and show you. So it's easier to do it with a spell, and it's a lot harder to do it with a race, because when you're doing a race, you have to program a lot of other stuff, not just the havoc data, which I'll explain what that is afterwards. The havoc data, the nav mesh, everything else, you have to script what the thing looks like. It's such a pain in the ass to actually make a race. You can somewhat take a copy of what's already there and kind of tweak it, but it doesn't quite work that way, and it's a lot. creating races is just really, really hard, and it's very difficult. So it's better off to leave that to somebody who can actually teach you how to do it, because I don't know how to do it. It's beyond my scope. So I'm just teaching the baselines of what to look for and how the creation kit is put together, so you can understand on how to make your own mods and things like that. So it's a little bit easier for you. Okay, so now we have the skins. This is basically what, you can basically turn an NPC into a horse and everything else, because the skins don't matter what it looks like, but you wouldn't be able to ride an NPC just because you made him look like a horse. You would still have to, the game still requires it to know it's a horse, which I'll get into in a minute, because there's something very specific in that you need to do. Alright, so anyway, you can make them tall, big, large, small, whatever. You can use the console command to adjust things, but you can actually do it through the creation kit, and this is basically how you do it. You want the height, you can put them like 5 feet, whatever. I'm not sure what the scale of that is. I think that's like 1 foot or something like that. And you can make them weigh like 55,000 pounds and stuff. It's hilarious. Okay, so skin is, again, what they, from the far away model, you can make them look like a horse from far away, and then when you get up to them, it's like, oh, that's a human. See, the Breton race already has a skin, so you don't need to put a skin to them. That's already pre-done. This is for other things in here that if you decided to make, or clothing, or whatever else it is, you can put it on them. You can change the voices of them. That would be kind of interesting to see a male Breton with a female, whatever voice. Weapon listing is what the weapons they would have on them when they die, or if you pickpocket them and things like that. And so there's a whole list of stuff that you can do with that as well. This is an alignment where you can actually make them aligned with whatever race it is, things like that. The disposition is how much they like you. You can start off with anything you want, or you can have nothing at all. And then death item is what the enemy looks like when it dies. And so what happened? The death item is like what it looks like when it dies, and what you can get. Because basically, when an enemy dies, when an NPC dies, it technically becomes a container, so you can put pretty much anything you want in them. So that's the baseline of what these tabs are for. And if you want to make a female, you can do that. All right, stats. Because this determines, like I said, that box determines whether the AI is female or male. That'd be kind of interesting to have female and male horses. All right, so anyway, the stats. The stats are their baselines. Do you want them to auto scale up, things like that. When you click this, it automatically adjusts, the math automatically adjusts in here for what it is. So you can start them off at whatever level you want. I'm not sure what the PC level multi is. Calculation minutes, calculation, maximum, minimal, maximum. So when you do this, you can actually adjust the calculations, but that would be for, very specifics in the math you knew, things like that. Not sure what the health offset. I've never understood what health offset is, but the base health, obviously, the calculated health. That calculated health is based off of the base health, things like that, and that's the magic. And it's pretty self-explanatory, a lot of stuff. And you can make these classes. Like, for example, this is a miner, not like miner as in a child, but a miner, like somebody with a pickaxe and a thing. You can also give them specific skills. There's a whole list of skill listings that you can do, which is under a different section of the game, which I'll go over, but that's basically the gist of it. Now, when you go into factions, it tells you what factions these belong to, so he would be friendly with them, they would be familiar with him. They wouldn't be familiar with the actual NPC itself. That would be programming through scripts. So when you hear two people talking, it's like, hey, Aldor, how you doing? And things like that. That would be through a script, but you would have to actually script in conjunction with the faction. So, like I said, as you can start to see, scripting is a good portion of where all of these things come into play, because without the scripting, it's off. You wouldn't be able to do much of anything. But for the most part, you can actually add a faction, copy a stack of them, things like that. So if you wanted to copy these and put this onto a different NPC, let's say you could copy it just by clicking, right-clicking and copying the entire stack. You don't even need to do that. You could just right-click and copy stack, and it'll do the entire thing. All right, so now we go relationships. Relationships are what the NPC is in a conjunction to, whether somebody's friendly with somebody, whether somebody's considered a spouse. This is how you would set up things to be married and things like that. Now, A relationship is nothing more than how an NPC gets along or belongs to with a faction or anything else. It's not just boy, girl, gayness, whatever you want to call it. It's literally what connection an NPC has to another NPC or faction or whatever. You can set the NPCs to have a faction with, friendly with all, giants, or like even the elephants and the giants or whatever it is. And then that would require scripting, because the NPCs, even though they're all like everything any AI in the game is an NPC, you would still have to script a human to be able to be part of the whatever faction is out there, because everything in the game is a faction. So the elephants are considered a faction, the saber-tooths are considered a faction, the orcs and everybody else are all considered a faction. So basically every animal type and any NPC in the game has its own set of factions, and that faction is whatever the NPC is. So that's in that regard. Keywords. Keywords are extremely important, because those are what dictate and make the AI and make the game understand what something is. So for example, if you use add a keyword, I'm going to go actor type horse. Okay. This is how you would tell the game that it's a horse. So for example, as I said earlier, having the skin of a human look like a horse would never allow you to ride it, because the game wouldn't know what it is. Same thing with having a horse out there. Just because you have a horse and a picture of a horse, the game has no idea what it is, and that's why the keywords are important on this, because the keywords are what tell the game exactly what it is. So you can summon a horse, but if you don't actually have the keyword actor type horse, you would never be able to get on top of it. The game wouldn't know what to do with it. It would say horse and everything else, but it just wouldn't do anything. So that's how the game does stuff. Now this is where things get really tricky, is these next couple of tabs, and I'm only going to go over to the spell listing tab. I'm not going to go anything beyond that, because this is more than enough information right now, and I don't want to overwhelm your head with too much information. Besides, I don't really know too much about these tabs beyond this point. But the information I'm giving you should be allowing you to mess around with those and understand them should you want to. Alright, so anyway, you have the AI data. This is what type of information this NPC or whatever it is has. So, for example, if it's a chair, you'd have the data in this, where obviously you wouldn't have half of the stuff, but this mainly applies to NPCs. But if you have like a chair, you would have the data in it of sitting down and things like that. But when you're dealing with an NPC, it has AI data and AI packages. They kind of go hand in hand, because the AI package is nothing more than a compilation of the AI data expanded. So it would tell like where to walk, where to do things like that. So the AI data is basically how it behaves. The AI package is telling the NPC what to do at specific points, and what behaviors trigger when and things like that. So they go hand in hand in that regard. So you can actually set these NPCs to anything you want, as per on the list. And if you wanted to make a new behavior, you could. But again, you'd have to script it and then program it into this particular one to follow the script on this, and then the script would have to. It's just a really big interconnection issue with this. So you can just basically set this however you want. You can set it so the aggro is really huge. So if you walk, as soon as you walk into a freaking area, they behave a certain way. So the combat style, if you wanted them to do one-handed, if you wanted them to act like elephants or whatever it is, they could do all that. But keeping in mind, when you start messing around with things like that, unless you have a script that tells an AI to behave with a different type of AI. So for example, a human AI, all human AI is kind of programmed the same way, meaning the game knows it's human. But if you start messing around with like animal scripts and things like that, you would need to literally program the AI for the human, or the human type NPC, or the humanoid, whatever it is, to act like that. But you would have to have a script that connects those two together. You wouldn't just be able to throw it together in that regard. And then GIF filters is what you give them, things like that. You can give the mood and everything else. So again, the AI packages here, sorry, that was the end of that tab. So the AI packages are a little bit different, because again, this is what tells the NPC what to do. where to go, how to dress, does it need to get up at a certain time, does it need to change its clothing before bed and things like that. That's all of this stuff. You would take all the information and then combine a package with it and tell the AI what to do. So when you're doing all of this stuff, as you can see, the scripting is a major part to do with whatever you want to do, but you have to know how to script the stuff, and that's where things really get tricky. So this is why a lot of mods, as you're starting to see, a lot of mods have messed up problems with them because people don't take the time to go this in-depth in them, and almost none of the videos explain any of this, and that's why there's a lot of problems with mods. So that's the AI package, and you can do whatever you want. You'd have to open up the packages. Again, they're in the form of scripts. So if you edit it, I can't edit that. I don't know where the heck it is. Let's see, edit, add, copy, stack, use info. I'd have to figure it. Oh, see, here's the editing. So as you can see in this particular AI, it says that unlock on arrival, allow eating, allow sleep. As you can see, it's extremely intricate. So I'll go over exactly what happens when somebody makes a mod and they don't go this in depth afterward, but I'm just going over these base tabs first. So now when you go to inventory, this is literally a container. NPCs are containers, for lack of better explanation. They're just a container that has mobility and AI and just the packaging and everything else. These containers are containers within this container, meaning that there's subsections of this game where you can actually add things to these and actually have them on him. And so when you're doing containers, it's a little tricky because you don't want to wind up, like I said, there's too much involved with this, so I don't want to go over your head right now, but basically keeping in mind something I'll be going over later is that when you do these containers, just remember what I'm saying now, that when you add something to this, something else in this is already being used by this actor. So if you put something into this actor's, container ability from another actor that's using it, that's already being used, and let's say the item is unique, you'd wind up having a problem. So you can, in essence, here's something really crazy you could do. You could actually have an actor pickpocket an actor out of an actor, but you would have to script it so you'd be able to, in other words, they'd be able to carry people on them, but it would require like this ridiculous type of script that you could do, but you could do it. But you would have to make the actor, put him in the package, then you would have to put him in a container somewhere, and then you would have to use this to get this container connected to the containers that you put the actor in. So the actor just doesn't show up in here. These are actually in a secondary part of the creation kit in a different section under a different thing. So what happens is that section is made kind of like this, and then it's just connected. That's all it is. So that's how this works. So here's loots, which is, like I said, these are just a lot of intricacies. That's why I said this is going to take at least 3 hours to go over. So you can put any weapon you want on these. So for example, if you want to change it from a pickaxe, there's a list of weapons you can do, and so you can do that. You can put keys on them, things like that. So that's how you can do all this. And then these are the clothing that they would turn into. If the AI package back here had a way for them to change clothing to go to sleep when they go to sleep, this is where it would be. You would change their sleep outfit, and then you would tie the AI package into the sleep outfit, and you would say, okay, let's say you wanted to have them change into, this person's outfit before he goes to bed. So whenever you see an NPC go to bed, and all of a sudden they change their clothes instantly and then lie down, this is the part of the game that controls that particular aspect. So that's basically how this works. The owner of this, if it's owned, that's how it's basically almost dictated as it's stolen. So that's a tag that you can do when it comes to that. That's not the only way, but that is one of the ways. Its owner is the NPC of whatever it is that you're doing. So the object of this case would be the barracks key. You can change it to the house key, but keeping in mind, if you start messing around with the keys, you can't just put the key in there without disrupting the rest of the game. There's a way to get this key in there, but you'd have to do something very specific about it. And then you could use this exact version of it, but what would happen is it would mess with the game because something's already using that. So, like I said, I'm just giving you information for when you catch up to this, you'll understand what's going on. All right, so now the next tab is the spell listing. Okay, the spell listing would be if they want to have any types of spells, and you can give them any types of perks you want. The thing with the spell listing is, again, the spell listing is like the inventory. You have weapons and stuff like that, and then you have an entire container of stuff. Basically, the difference between this and this is that the loot, these things are basically loot boxes. There's a bunch of things in these loot boxes, and what you could do is you have to make the items first, then you have to create a loot box if you wanted them in there and put all those items in the loot box, and then you would have to put this loot box in this NPC. So it's a step-by-step process. But that would basically be how this works, and the spell listing works the same kind of way, where you have a spell listing. You have to set the spells up, and I'll be going over how to do that so you can start to see this. But again, this is just the baseline of how these tabs operate. And so what you have is you would have to create the spell. You'd have to put the effect on it and things like that, which again, I'm going over your head, which I'm going to piece together afterwards. I'm just giving you a heads up so you know when I come to it, it's easier for you to follow. So now what you have is all of these spell listings and everything else. You could put whatever spell you wanted to in here, or if they already had it, you'd be able to do any of that stuff. And in this case, you could also have inventory. You could give these guys scrolls, or potions, or whatever you can come up with. So then the perks, again, you can give these people perks. So the guards probably have perks and things like that. I never actually really quote looked at them, but that's the baseline of how this operates. So in the meantime, I'm going to take a 5-minute break, as I said, give my eyes a rest. Anybody's got to use the restroom, do what you got to do, and then I will come back and I will start on creating, I think what I'll do is I'll create an NPC, and then I'll create a spell, then I'll do a couple of other things so you can start to see how this whole entire thing has been put together. That also will double over as explaining to you how to backtrack something inside the creation kit. And so when I mean backtrack, it's when you're trying to figure out how something is connected to something inside the creation kit, you literally have to go in and dig and look for it. But there's a process for doing that, which is why I explain it in this manner, because it's a lot easier for you to find something that you're looking for by backtracking it. Once you know where these lists are, you can pretty much backtrack anything and see how it's put together. But you have to start at the finished product first, and then backtrack how this finished product was put together. That way you can see from beginning to end by going backwards. That's the key. That's the reason for that. I call that backtracking. So let me go to the bathroom real fast. Take a break. Rest your eyes. Grab something to eat if you need to. I'm going to talk to my friend for a bit, and I'll reconvene at about 12:05. I'm going to keep this running as it is, but then I'll just see you guys in a bit. What does? Oh, God. Okay. Sorry, my friend and I were laughing about this masturbation notice thing that friggin' it was like apparently a college prank. Anyway, how I found it was from Rich from Review Tech USA or something like that. It's actually pretty funny. So anyway, back to what I was saying. I'm going to wind up going over and making an actor now and showing the procedure for going through and what is called detaching your mod from the game. So when you make any mod, as I was stating, if you remember what I went through all these windows and all the tabs and everything else, when you're making a mod, it is extremely important to go through and delete and remove all of the data from the shell. So let's say first thing you want to do is create a new actor. So let's see here. Let's go in and do actor. We'll do Breton. I'll just keep Breton open for what we did here, and I'll use this. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new actor. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do 01. I usually use 01 because what happens is when you do 01, it puts it at the top of the list. So anything you put in 01, it's the first thing on the list. So no matter what you do, it's always there. So let's try this. Let's do, I'll just put this guy's name as I'll just put this guy's name as Radic. Radic. I'll do that. And then I'm going to call him Radic. Now, as you can see, I put 01 to differentiate from the rest of the actors in here. So this ID 01 is only specifically for the creation kit itself. So now, since I'm already using a currently generated actor, what I have to do is I have to go through and I literally have to remove all of this stuff from him. Any factions, I have to remove them. Any relationships, I got to remove them. Any keywords, I got to remove them. Any AI, I have to rearrange that. I have to remove any AI packages. So I'm basically highlighting them and hitting delete. So when I did the factions, I have to do all that. So let's see. Let me cancel this and show you one quick thing that I was doing with this. So let's say the male editor. So what I forgot to do was explain that when you right click and copy a stack, if you delete it, you can hit V again, or I'm sorry, you can hit paste stack and it'll paste them all back again. That would be the point to copy and remove stack. But for now, I just drag my mouse over, highlight them all, and then delete that. When you also have to look under here, assigned crime faction, you have to stick none, because again, I'm creating a brand new entry into the creation kit, so the creation kit knows this is who this is. So let's see, Radic. Oops, let's see. Okay, so now I'm going to make him invulnerable. I'm going to do relationships, keywords, AI data. I'm going to do no combat style. Hey, how's it going? None. I think it's space. Default combat style. It's default. And then let's do mood. Let's do puzzled. Let's do aggression. By doing all these things, you can change them afterwards, but by doing all these things, you're completely removing any... I'm just going to put he helps nobody. He doesn't even help himself. So anyway, I'm going to remove the AI packages from here. When you're doing all these windows, you have to make sure that you remove anything from down here as well. So again, this character is going to have literally no attachment to anything in here at all. So when I do the inventory, I'm going to do, I think it's at the top, none, right? Object. I forget how I would do. I don't think I can actually get this out of here. Ale object. Oh, you know what? I gotta get it out of here. The object shows up in there. Alright, so now he has nothing in there. If you wanted to make your own outfit, you would have to put it in there and then it would show up over here. That's right, I forgot these windows are interconnected. So the object wouldn't even exist in here. So if you want an object to show up down here, you'd have to make sure that the object itself was, let's put ale on him. Ale. Cancel. Alright, so make sure there's nothing in the spell lists or anything else like that. If we want to do a preview of it, what you can do is you can look at them over here, and putting full, or clicking the head will bring them in just to the head, but if you click full, it'll give you a full body shot of them so you can actually see what it actually looks like, and you can turn anything in these windows can be shown over here when you're doing it. It'll show you what it looks like. So using the mouse wheel, you can zoom in, moving it, rolling the mouse wheel back, you can zoom out, you can turn. If you right click on it, it'll show you, all the excess detail in here that you would need for like if he moves or anything else of that nature. So that's the extent of that. I'm going to close that window, and then I'm just going to uncheck that. Now sounds, sound levels normal. You do have to go over to these windows here because there's a little bit more intricate when you're removing all of the data from the whatever it is that you're doing. So let's see, animation. These would just be the animations for this, so you don't want to mess with this. But if you wanted to do any specific types of animations, you would have to go and understand how to actually edit it. So that you'd have to understand what HKX is, like what extension that is. And you can look that up and everything else, but that'll give you an indication of how it's put together. And then basically you would follow that same principle for like adding spells or anything else to the nature, in that nature. So I usually just leave all of this stuff alone unless I'm literally customizing something very specific. So what you would have is you can actually edit all of these things very specifically inside DDS Max and things like that. By the way, DDS stands for Direct Draw Surface, and the program that does that is DDS Max. You can decrypt and unlock these files and then go ahead and re-edit them once you know how to do all that. I don't know how to model, and I don't understand how to use those programs, so I'm just telling you, if you knew how to do that or whatever it is, this is where you would find all this information. And again, if you want to find that, you would have to backtrack how things work, which I will go over afterward. So once you do all of this, and you have all of these things set up, you would then usually try to keep this tab first, and then what you do is you click OK, and what's going to wind up happening is once you click OK, it's going to say this is going to create a new character, and you're going to say yes. You've changed the form. The form editor ID is this ID, so that's how it works. And now if you take a look, my actor is right there. So if I open it, this is what it is. It's as simple as that. So he's a naked actor, has no clothing on. So now I have all that set up. Next, I'm going to show you how to do a horse, because this is where you would use one of the keywords. So again, I'm doing all of these things in succession in order so you can follow them much easier. So the first thing you would have to do is you would have to find a horse, and obviously Shadowmere is the easiest one to know. So because that's just a common. I'm in mail race, so it wouldn't show up in there. What I usually do is I click all, and I find that. So that is the actual spell itself. I'm gonna find Shadowmere. Actually, you know what? I gotta find the actual horse actor. Let me see, horse race. Okay, so I'm just going to use horse race in this. See this shadow mirror right there. So one thing I'm going to point out is you'll notice that you see how that like looks like a little robot face. That's the icon for NPCs. Like that's the actual icon for NPCs. That other one you saw with the if you do all here, this is that represents spell. That represents an actual spell type of effect, and so forth down the line. These are lighting. That is a trigger. You can highlight this, and you'll see what these icons represent. So, for example, that's something to do with fleeing. I'm not sure what all this stuff is, but you'll say the location, things like that. So, like I said, they're pretty much it's self-explanatory, but you'd have to know. You have to know like where it is. So as you can see, I used the filter to filter out exactly where it is, and then I would find the horse. I would find the actual horse itself. But if you went on to the, because again, this filter window works exactly like this. You want to type in barrel, you'll find all the barrels. You want to type in chair, you'll find all the chairs. So what you would do now is, if I go to actor and then I go to horse race. It's only going to show that one thing for the horse race. But if I remove that, you'll see that there's a bunch of horses in here. So I just use shadow mirror for the heck of it because it looks cool. But let's say we'll just use a regular brown horse or something like that. Caravans are a little bit different. Just be aware of that because you can't. They're programmed. They're pre-programmed AI. It's not like you can just get on them and ride them. That's why they're fast travel horses. But you could get any horse. You could probably get up and ride them if you want. It would require some form of scripting, so it would remove the fast travel option from it and then allow you to ride it. So, but you would have to do a totally different type of script and animations and things like that. So, let me see. Let me do, I'll just use a regular brown horse here, for example. And as you can see, the preview, as I said beforehand, you can look at it. And give me a second, I got to get something out of the oven. I will be right back. So anyway, all right. So now this is where keywords start taking place, and so what I'm going to do is, as you can see, the respawn, the horse, and everything else. So I'm going to do this 01. Radic horse. And I'm going to put Radic, alright, so, I was going to, I'm going to type it as Radic's Ride, is what I'm going to do. So, what I usually try to do in this case is to keep, you'll notice that I put capitals after each section because it makes it easier to read. But when you're doing it, you want to kind of put, you can't put spaces in here. It won't let you. It'll tell you it's an illegal character. You literally have to have it all together. That would be like trying to put a space in, emails and stuff. It doesn't let you really do it. But in the horse's name, that's different because that's the thing that's showing up in the game. So I'm going to make this unique, and then I'm going to make them invulnerable. All right, so what I'm going to do is go into, this is a horse. You can give it any type of skin you want. So for example, as you can see here, it changes the color so you can see like what it looks like. So this, you can also edit. Once you find out like the skins and everything else, that's a totally different story. But I'll go into that as well, on how to change the color and things like that if you wanted to, which is really intricate because it's how I made one of my own mods. And so you would have to keep this as a horse race. Like if you did it as an ice race, that wouldn't make any sense. Imperial race, you'd have to. That would just be like really weird. Like look at that. So anyway, you'd keep it as a horse. And so you want to be able to ride that. So, okay, so you obviously don't have to have a, a weapon or anything else, but you can technically. It's weird too because you can't put a voice of a human over an animal unless you script it. So you would have to script the animal to be able to actually do that. And so I just leave it at that. And then as soon as they die, what happens is that's what the thing looks like. So obviously when it's dead, you're going to have a death item horse. But if you wanted it to change into a wraith when it dies, you'd do that, and then it would just be a dead wraith. Don't ask. It wouldn't make sense, but I'd also think you have to, I think you would have to script that in order for that to actually happen as well. So don't quote me on that. Okay, so now what you do is you go into the stats. Again, since you're using this, since this horse isn't really used in anything else anyway, you can kind of get away with doing this, but at the same time, you got to be really careful about what else you're not doing and things like that. So you can set this to whatever levels you want. This screen doesn't really mean much. So the ENC class is the, I'm not sure what ENC stands for, but basically that would be like Ice Wraith, and you'd have to match everything together. So when you're doing, what the traits are, you have to, as when you're doing the skins and stuff like that, you have to make sure that the class matches that as well. Alright, so now when you do factions, it's going to say, factions. It's common sense. Alright, so anyway, the relationship is you can actually stick yourself as the owner. So if I were to do new, I would have to do the parent NPC is just the owner of the, the child NPC would be who owns it. No, the child NPC would go to the owner. The parent NPC would be the owner. So that's the relationship with the child-parent stuff. And then you can do relationship level, whatever it is. You can really go into depth with this stuff. And so this is a little tricky to do. You can mess around with this, but this is, again, a little tricky to do. You can do association as in, courting. This is how you would set an NPC to, like, marry somebody and things like that. And so I'm not going to do a relationship right now. You'd have to create, what happens is you'd have to create a different type of you'd have to create a brand new relationship inside the section of the the creation kit that has this in order for it to get what you want to show up here in order for you to use that. And then not only after you did that, you would have to set this correctly to work. Alright, so let's cancel that. Let's cancel that. Alright, so now going into keywords. Okay, actor type horse. Without the keyword in this, all you'd see in the game is this. You wouldn't be able to get on top of it anything. It would even say Radix horse, but you wouldn't be able to do that. You know what I mean? There would be no way for you to pull that off. So what you have to do is you have to add a keyword, actor type horse, and that would literally give you the option to ride it in the game. So that's how that would work. And when I close this, the AI data, I have to get rid of any AI data. He's not going to help anybody. You set it to helps allies, confidence, brave. Set him to frenzy. That wouldn't be a good idea. Mood is neutral. So he's usually happy. And morality, no crime. So that's morality, as if stuff happens, like how does the stuff get triggered and things like that. Its combat style is its stance, just so you know that. That's really what it comes down to. Obviously, horses can't give anybody anything, and that's it. So now, when I close this, it's going to ask me to. It's going to say, okay, click create a new form. So now, when I go up the top, if I just do 01, it's going to filter out everything with 01 that I did. So let's see here. This is inside here. I'm going to close this, and I'm going to do all. Usually it takes a second for this to register. There we go. So all, as you can see, all the stuff that I'm using, 01, goes at the top of the list for easier finding. Okay, now I'm going to go into the spell listing. That's the next thing that's connected. But this is going to start to, now this is where it gets into showing you just how interconnected the things are in order to actually make them. Alright, so what I'm going to wind up doing is, I am going to create a summon horse using the stuff I just did. And so once you see this, you'll understand how this is actually put together. So first thing, as you can see, Radic, okay, the guy that I just named. When I create this spell listing, it's going to go into this spell. So he will have the ability to do this. Alright? Or I can just use whatever. But I'm going to use the spell listing, and then I'm going to keep backing it up. So I'm going to really get intricate and show you how this works. Alright, so, first thing, I'm going to go to spells. And what you're going to do is you go into magic. And now, when you're doing the spell, okay, the spell has to be created first, okay? So let's see, ability spell. Okay, these would be all the spells in the game. So you can take any one of these things. And since I'm going to be using a summon spell, the best thing to do is to actually use an already existing spell. So I'm just going to put summon. And it's going to pull up all the ability, it's going to pull up all the summons. Now, it's important to note that a spell can be used multiple places because it's not really directly connected to anything, even though it is. The very specific spell being created can be whatever you attach that spell to, and you can use that in multiple places because the spells don't really have any connection in the same way the AI does. So let's try this. Let's do, I'm going to do summon, I'll just do summon Dremora, for example. Okay. Alright, so first thing you want to do is you need to do the summon. Because you got to do there's several things that to do. There's several steps into making a spell. And so what you do is, I'll go over these menus with you first. Alright, first of all, this is the name. Again, the ID is how the creation kit does. So I'm going to do 01 summon Radix horse. And then I will do the name of the spell, which is summon Radix horse. Okay, now these are the types of spells you can have, and it's a voice power is also a spell, even though it's a power. It's classified into the game as an actual spell. So you want to put this as a spell. Then the type of spell you can do for the casting is you do an ability, whatever. If you do, let me see, spell power. Okay, so there's different castings on this, which is a little weird. Hold on, I'll get to that in a minute. Fire and forget. All right. There's ways to change these, which is a little. Which comes from something else. There's a way to get these active, and I'll get to those in a second. There's a couple different ways to cast it. There's area, range, target effect, things like that. Fire and forget. Fire and forget is that you cast it once and it's done. So the game casts it, and then it forgets it cast it. That's what it's called. That's why it's called fire and forget. And then the delivery can be at a specific target or anything else, but in this particular case, it's wherever you actually aim the spell, so it would be the target of where you aim the spell. Now, the type of spell it is different. So let's see, it's a summon. So if you were to change like telekinesis or whatever it is, you want to change it to summon here. And you can change it to do whatever you want. One hand, either hand, left hand, shield, whatever. You can set it to voice if you friggin' wanted to, but you'd have to do a whole thing with that. But basically, if you just do both hands, which means it would require both hands to do. So when you do it, that's it. That would show it up. That's how it would be. And so, you see here. Let's cast goat. Okay. Now, do a casting perk. This would be, the perk would be what is the requirement it would be to have that spell. So you could do nothing. None. All in all. That's it. Alright, so now, once you get all of that set up, the spell cost and the charge time and everything else can be adjusted, but you want that as self-adjustment, which comes from a different place. So that's basically the list of the spell. So I'm going to have to remove this. And now I'm detaching what that spell was. So this is no longer a summoned Dremora spell. This is all there is to the spell screen. That's it. That's all there is. The other ones come up a little bit differently. So now what you do is you click OK to this, and it'll say, you know, do you want to save it? It's also, again, an 01 summon spell that I'm doing. Now, keeping in mind, it's 01 summon Radric's Horse, all right? And so I'm going to click OK. It's going to ask me... it's going to say I don't have an effect tied to this, which is true. So just click OK in that regard, and then it clicks yes. So now what we've done is we've created Summon Radric's Horse. Now what we have to do is we have to go to the effect and create an effect for when this thing is being cast. So in this case, I'm just going to use the Summon Dremora spell again. And this is an effect. If you notice, there's like a hat next to it. Now this isn't... This looks more confusing than it is. So I'll make this really easy. Okay. Now... you're gonna have to name this whatever your spell was. So in this case, instead of what I'm gonna have to do is 01, and I'm gonna go to all. It's gonna take a second for it to show up. Okay, so when I have summoned Radric's Horse, so now that you have the spell, you have to attach an effect to the spell or it almost won't cast. So in this case, since I'm already using 01 summon Radric's Horse, I can't use that same name in the editor. It won't let me, if you remember what I told you about that. So in this case, I would write it, I usually write it backwards. So in other words, I would write 01 Radric's Horse summon. So that's Horse summon. Okay, summon Radric's Horse. Remember, the name of the spell has nothing to do with the ID for the creation kit. It's a totally different thing. So summon Radric's Horse. All right, so it's a summon creature, which is what you want because you can summon pretty much, you know, anything. But again, you would have to script it to do that. And then this is where it listed under the spell when it was Fire and Forget. So here is where the listing for those show up. You can't change the summon spell itself. When I open it, I'll show you. Hold on a second. I'm going to spell itself. Okay, so, yeah, that's different. Okay, so you would have to do Fire and Forget, but you can do a constant effect. You can do concentration, which means, you know, you're gonna sit and say, okay, it's gonna take a second for it to, you know, wind up and cast. Takes a second, so you'd be like concentrating. So you can make the concentration. That would be like a drawn-out summon spell. But in this case, you just want to cast it and get it over with. And for the delivery, you can do on self, on contact, aimed. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff in here, but there's only a couple of things that you need to know. Then you can set what type of magic skill it is. So this would be controlling what section of the game it showed up under, so when you open your magic menu, you would see it. Would it be an illusion, restoration? Because I can set this to destruction if I wanted to, and it would still cast exactly the same. The only difference is it would show up under destruction, which you can, but that just doesn't make any sense. Okay, maximum skill level. You can set it to 0 if you just wanted to be able to summon it. Now, when you're doing association, you have to associate what you want the effect to do. So not only do you have to create a spell and then create an effect to attach the spell, now you need to create the actual, you need to take the item itself that you created and attach it to the actual effect. So in this case, for the Dremora summon, this is why I said going backwards in the creation kit is how you locate how things are connected together. So first we did the spell. Then we did the effect of the spell. Now we're doing the association for the effect of the spell. So you can't just create a spell and have something work. You have to have something to put into it, and then you have to have something put into the effect. So you attach the effect of the spell, and then you attach the actual what's being summoned to the actual effect of the spell. So what you have here is that I've already made Radix Ride, so it's actually Radix Horse. The spell effect is I'm summoning the horse. The actual effect of the spell that winds up happening is the horse being summoned. So what you would have to do is you'd have to attach, and I don't want a skill level attached to this, but you could do that whatever you wanted to, so you know, whatever. But now what you have is the association item is the actual thing that's being summoned. So in this case, we took a Dremora spell and we removed it. Now, just so you know, the effect of a spell can be used in multiple places because the effect doesn't have any direct connection to the game like you would with, you know, an AI or, you know, anything of that nature. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is, there's a reason why I set this up the way it was, and like I showed you. So when you have something wrong inside the creation kit or anything else of that nature, you know how to go about looking at it. So I can tell you right now, when I go to set Radix Ride to this, it's not going to show up because this list right here is the list of actual things that are that you can attach to this. Because when you're doing conjuration, you can't put something conjuration. You can only set anything in here to be conjured, anything. Thanks. So anyway, you can set a conjuration for anything, but the thing here is what's causing this to determine what list this is coming off of is the conjuration. However, that's not just it. And I left this out on purpose to show you that when you're doing a spell, it's like, what do you do if something goes wrong? So, as you can see, Radix Ride is not even on this list. So let me show you how to do that by clicking OK to this for now. I'm going to first remove the Dremora summon because I don't need that. And then I'm going to click OK. It's going to ask me to set a new thing here. Now, keeping in mind, I can't use... it's got to take a second. Okay, so now I have Radix Horse Summon. I have Radix Ride. I got the actual spell. And now I have Radix himself. So, the reason I use Radix is I'm not actually going to use Radix. I'm going to use it. I'm just going to putting him in there because you would have to script him, and when he would, you know, you could basically make him a follower if you wanted to and things like that. But what you wind up doing now is you wind up taking the spell and the what you're actually summoning with the effect. So that's the effect. That's the spell. That's what you want to summon. The problem with this is, in order to get this to show up, it has to be on the effect list. But as you can see, this isn't on the effect list. There's nothing here to associate it with. So what you have to do is you have to go back to the NPC you actually, what you want summoned. So in this case, it's the horse. I left this out on purpose because unless this option is clicked off, summonable, it'll never show up on the conjuration list. It must be clicked summonable, period. So what you're going to do is I made it summonable. And that's why I said I left this out on purpose, because if you don't know how to look for this stuff and you don't know what menus are being connected to what, you're going to have a problem with it. But at least now you start to understand why it's important to go through and check everything. And this is all the stuff that everything in these videos that you watch online do not go over. So I'm going to click OK. Now I go back to the actual effect list. Okay. And now when I go to the association, the reason I put it at 01 is because it puts it at the top of the list. Now you see I have the horse. So without that little option being checked off, it doesn't show up. And you would have no idea what the hell caused it. So even me, after doing these for a while, you still forget certain things. So what you do is you have to go again. You have to understand how to backtrack. So again, as you said, I started with the spell. But then it went backtrack and I'm like, okay, so how do I do how is an actual spell put together in the game. So that's when I looked over and I says, okay, the conditions or whatever else it is. Now, just a quick thing. Conditions are what has to be set, what's required for you to do things. So what you do is, let's say you wanted to do a new condition. A condition would be, you could have anything on here set to say, well, you wouldn't be able to get this unless it was locked or something. It would be really dumb to do any of that stuff, but, you'd have to be able to do, you'd have to know how these things work, but basically this is how this is all put together. This is all scripting stuff. Your conditions for being able, you could set this so the condition would have to be at night, you know what I mean? Or you couldn't have anybody else around to see you summon it, things like that. So this would be all like very specifics on how you would get the spell to be cast. Otherwise, without a condition, it will just be able to be you can just cast it. All right. So now that you have all that, these menus look a lot more complex than they actually are. But here's the simplicity of this. These are just the lighting effects. That's all they are. You can mix and match these, and the only way for you to understand what they do in the game is to change one thing on it, then go into the game to see how it is, and then see what it does. So that's why I always tell people when you're messing with these things to take something already in existence because it's already set up, so that way you can see. So by messing around with these, you can change how everything is. I don't alter anything on the menu display object. I leave it as is. But for the most part, that's the baseline on how you actually get these things put together. So now I'm going to take this a step further and I'm going to put this into a book, which is a completely different issue. So now, as you can see, don't be afraid to go into any of these things because, again, if you make a mistake, you just hit cancel and then reopen it. You know what I mean? Because you don't know what the hell the stuff does. The only way to know what it does is if you go into the friggin' game and look. Unless you already know what the spell looks like, and then you can open up something you're familiar with and say, oh, okay, I know what that effect does. Things like that. So that's the baseline of how this works. And so when you're doing all this, that's how it is. So now, when you're doing the base cost and everything else, remember I was telling you in the effect, in the spell itself, the effect and the cost are basically done here. And so what you have to do is, let me close this. This is going to click OK because it's already been made. Now I have to open up the actual spell itself. And now I actually have to put the effect of the spell into this by right-clicking on this and going New, choosing the effect, and then clicking it. Now what happens is I can do the duration of whatever it is I want. This is seconds, minutes, hours, days. So let's say I would want this only there for, 5 seconds. You would then do your conditions again, but you don't need that. So what happens is now, without the effect, I couldn't put it in here. So now the spell doesn't know what the effect was. And without the effect, I had to attach something to the effect. Then I have to attach the effect to the spell. So it's not just creating the spell. It's not just creating what you want to summon. It's not just creating the effect. You literally have to connect them all together. Alright, so now I'm going to take this a step further. So now that is a totally fulfilled spell of what to do here. Okay, so now I'm going into tome. I don't know what I don't know exactly where the thing is. Well, I'm going to put in tome. So now we have the actual spell tomes. These are books. Now, spell tomes, the difference between a regular book and a spell tome is you could turn any book into a spell tome and any spell tome into a book if you understand how that works. But let's say, for example, I'm just going to pick a Conjuring book. Okay, this is where things really start getting interesting and fun. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, let's say I wanted this to be a spell tome for summon. So what I would do is I'd put in the ID of 01. I'm just going to put Raedric summon. Raedric horse spell. Now I'm going to do as a spell tome. Again, this is just for purposes of the actually, you know what? I'm going to put this as tome. There we go. Tome. So, alright, so what you have now is Raedric's Horse Tome. Again, I put it as 01 so it goes to the top of the list. Now, when you're doing this, I'm going to redo this as, instead of conjure that, I'm going to do summon Raedric. You got to remember, too, you only have 24 letters that you can put in these things. So, you can cut these words out. You don't need to put spell tome in. Is summon Raedric Horse. Summon Radix Horse. Okay, so now that's all set. So that's the spell tome that we're going to be using for this. Now, this is where things get really messed up, because now I'm going to start to show you how to change the covers of the books and everything else. This gets really, really tricky to do. So, here we go. This is the name. That's the ID. But now you get into how much the book weighs. It's not going to, nobody's going to care if you put it, like, you can put the book to 50 pounds. It's not going to matter. Okay, you can put a value of it. Now, keeping in mind, the value that you put here is not going to be the same value. The value is the gold. So if you want this to be sold at a vendor or whatever else it is, you can put it at 0, whatever. If you want to be able to find it or whatever else it is, or sell it to a vendor, keeping in mind the value that you put here is not going to be the value that shows up in the game, because there's other variables that affect how much something is. So if you have like a perk that says, you get more, you get more out of a vendor or anything else, that's not going to show 75. It's going to show however you have your character set up as. So you can experiment with that to get the right amount. Just because you say 3,500, that doesn't mean it's 3,500. But that's how much the value should show up from a vendor. But even still, that's subjective, because you would need to know how much, what it is or anything else, according to the game and your perks and anything else. Okay, so now what you have here is what type of book. Is it a skill book? You could write your own skill, but you'd have to write a totally new skill and then put it here. But that, for purposes of this, it's a spell. So it's a book that's going to teach you a spell. And so what you're going to do is you're going to look for this. And as you can see, Raedric's Summon Horses on here, because you want this book to be able to teach you that spell. Now, when you do an inventory image, this is a little different. You can actually use stuff that already exists in the game, or you can do your own editing. And you would have to know where the images are in this. They're already in the creation kit. You just have to look them up, which I'll go over afterwards. But if you want to, this would be the inventory image. So when you pick the book up, this is what it's going to look like. And then when you pick up, the message icon, then when you pick it up, you'll see when it's in your inventory what it looks like. So when you, if you wanted to have a different picture in your inventory, you could edit this, but this is where things get tricky, because you would have to know exactly, you have to decompress all the DDS files so you already have access to the image, or if you know how to actually edit, like if you know where it is inside there, you can actually utilize this line inside. Otherwise, you would have to, literally, if you wanted a different image when it's in your inventory, to like have a doll or whatever it is, you could put it on there and it wouldn't matter, because the image that's in your inventory has no bearing on what the actual book is. It's just what it looks like when it's in your inventory. So it's usually a good idea to keep it as, as is. Now, when you do an image art, if you decompile all the images in the game, meaning you could take them out. There's a tool called the BSF or whatever it is. Okay, BAS decryptor or whatever it is. It's found on the Nexus. You can actually remove and unpack all of the .dds files. So once you do that, you would have to keep whatever you used with the mod as part of it, because again, that would be in the same context of the dependency, because if you didn't actually pack it up, when you're dealing with a picture or something like that, you have to pack the picture up with the mod. When you have a dependency such as one of the expansions, everybody's pretty much going to have that. So that's on them to get. But with you, when you're saying it's like a very specific picture, you would have to be able to upload the picture with it. So what you do is you decrypt, you remove all the pictures, and then you open up the whatever picture you want in an editing software like GIMP or whatever it is, and you can rearrange the picture. You can even put whatever you want over it. And then what you would do is you could either pack it back up as that particular name if you name the same file, or you could just pack it up as wherever the world art is, meaning what it's going to look like when it's on the ground. The world art is in the world, somewhere on the ground or hanging up or whatever. And then the inventory art, you can do whatever you wanted. Keeping in mind, some of these prevent you from picking it up, some of them don't. So you have to be careful about what the world art is, because if you use the wrong picture, you won't even be able to pick the book up. It'll show you can read it and stuff, but you won't even be able to actually pick it up and put it in your inventory. That would again require scripting, so it's easier just to make sure that, if you're going to edit something, to edit something that currently exists, so you get used to the editor. Okay, so now what you have is you can do the pickup sounds, when you pick up a book or open it or read it or whatever. You can totally change all these sounds. Okay, so the key factor on what makes these what makes the ability for you to actually know the game knows it's a spell tome is these down here. So if you remove these, the game has no idea. It's like the horse. You have to give the key word to the game in order for it to know what it is. Otherwise, a picture doesn't mean anything to the game. So when you do this, I copied the stack, so I'm going to redo that. So if you wanted to be able to have it as a vendor, you would not only have to, if you wanted it as a spell tome that's sold by a vendor, you would literally have to put it as a vendor book item. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to sell it to a vendor in the game. So that's another issue here. So, and then it's vendor item spell tome. So that would be what the game classifies these as. So as long as it knows it's a spell tome and that you can sell it and it is a book, the game will allow you to do that. So now, the last thing I'm going to tell you is gets really, really, really fun is the fonting. This is HTML script. And so by changing these letters and numbers, you can literally edit the book exactly how you wanted it. So you could, if you wanted this to go over to the left, you would do a line, and then let's say left. As long as you understand how the scripting is done, you're good, So let's see here. You're going to undo it. I don't have to undo it. There he goes. Okay, so undo is Control-Z. So what I'm going to do is make sure you got to be really careful when you're doing this. As long you can look up how to script this stuff. Like you can totally change anything in this by the text on this. So if you want this, so this is where the this code tells this where to be shown. So what happens is this will say Conjure Bone Man, and it would be in the center of the book. But if you didn't want that, you could actually type in fried chicken, and that would show up, and it would literally show up as like fried chicken in the game. It's amazing. So yeah, now it'd say fried chicken, yay, summon fried chicken. That would be ridiculous, but so I would do the name of it, which is Summon Radric's Horse, but that would be the name of the actual book itself when you're actually looking at the context. So it would be Summon Radric's Horse. So yes, the book name, when you see it on the ground or whatever it is, would say Summon Radric's Horse, but when you pick it up and actually look at it, it would say Summon Radric's Horse. So what you can do is you can mess around with the way these operate and things like that. So what I usually do is I look for other books that have like pages and pages and pages in them to see how the book is put together. And by understanding that, you can literally rewrite anything you want in any font that's inside the text editor. Plus, you can also edit it and then insert it into the editor, as long as to remember you add this stuff when you upload things. So you can also set a spell tome as a piece of paper and everything else, as long as it knows it's a tome. It probably wouldn't work too well, but you can do that. So you can do this to the left when you pick it up, and then you can do the font size. You can change it to I'm going to change this to 50, so it's bigger for some reason. I don't know why, I just am. And so now I've altered it. So now it's totally, unique. So let's see here. I'm going to do this. I'm going to create a new form. So now that's the spell tome. And again, remember, when you do the tome, you have to attach the summon. You have to attach the spell to it. So again, if you want a spell tome, you can't just have a spell tome without a spell. You can't have a spell without an effect. You can't have an effect without a summon. You know what I mean? It's or whatever. You can't have an effect without the actual spell doing itself. So it goes in a circle with how this stuff operates. So again, you can edit these. The inventory image. So basically, if I were to do this and put this here, I don't know if I can do that. Actually, yeah, I'd have to do this, and then I could do this. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Cancel that. I need to grab this. Hold on a second. I don't think I can copy it from here. I think I literally need to... Oh, no, I can. Okay, so when I open that, since it'll tell me it's an invalid directory, but you can do it. It doesn't... I don't have the actual... I'd have to have it out. I'd have to have it decrypted, but that's just basically how you would do it. And then what would happen is that picture would show up in here, so when it's in your inventory, you would look at it. So the inventory art is a high poly conjuration book, but I can change this to a high poly destruction book, and it would look like a destruction book, but it would be so you can mix and match this stuff. So let's do this. I'm going to leave it as a destruction book. It would look a little weird, but that's cool. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a weapon. All right, so I'm going to use a dagger. All right, let me do dagger. I'm going to use an ebony dagger to give you an example. Dagger. Where is it? All right, I'll just use Daedric dagger. Okay, now you'll notice that these icons, these are weapons, so that's just to keep in mind how the weapon works. So I'm going to do a Daedric dagger. Now, when you're doing these things, this is a little bit different. When I made a mod for how my weapons did with Hearthstone weapons and armor and stuff like that, I edited all of this stuff, the speed of it and things like that. I had to balance it off. I had to go into the game, test it, things like that. So what you're going to look at is, again, you have to look at the keywords, and the best way to understand this is to look at something that already exists. What type is it? What material it is? What, the vendor for the item and the weapon and things like that. So these are baselines on how this works on this. And then if you do first person mode, you can change it. You can do the model of, if you have the pictures, you can, like I said, you can remove this and make this a spear if you wanted to. It would look a little weird, but that's alright. So you'd have to make sure that you click playable, meaning you could use it, because if it wasn't, it'd be one thing. If you want to look at this, okay, once you pick it up, you can't drop it. This is all these random things that you would have to understand, you know what I mean? And so this skill is one-handed. You equip it to your right or left hand. You can do either hand. So I could equip this dagger in either hand. It would look a little weird because you'd have to have the animation to be able to do that in that case. I'm going to cancel that because I don't remember what that was, right or left hand. Okay, so this is I'm going to start getting into some really complex things. All right, so first thing here is I usually leave all of this stuff alone, but that's baseline of what you want. So you can change the name of the dagger to anything you want, but you'd have to do the ID if you wanted to change it differently, things like that. So I could have the ID of a Daedric dagger, but then I could name that Daedric dagger something very specific, things like that. I could name that as Raedric's friggin' dagger, whatever it is. So I would usually leave everything else. I don't know what any of this stuff means, so I don't bother with it. But again, you would have to, the material listing is important because it's letting you know that that particular aspect for the weapon material is how you actually make these daggers when you craft them. You have to have a very specific material. You have to have a keyword as material. So the keywords are a little different because the keywords are kind of like the spells in the regard that if you wanted to have a new material, you would have to actually create a new keyword for it. Then you would have to attach that keyword to the material you made, but if you would have to make your own material and so forth down the line, and then you would have to attach the material to the crafting system and everything else. So that's why I didn't go into any of that, because that's a really drawn out process. What I'm showing you now with the spell listing is the baseline of how the entire creation kit works when you want to add something or make something, what you have to do, what you have to check, what you have to look at, how to name stuff, how to, what to troubleshoot if it's not showing up in the list, what's causing the game to read it, just random things like that. So as you can see, there's a lot more to modding in this than people realize. And that's why a lot of these mods that people make have problems, because the statement I say, there's a major difference between using the creation kit to make a mod and making a mod using the creation kit. They're two completely different things. If you want to make a mod using creation kit, just go watch a video. But if you want to know how to use the creation kit to actually make a mod, this is all the in-depth detail stuff that you have to know how to do and go into, which is why it takes at least 3 hours for it to go over, because there's so much more involved in this. It's ridiculous. Because I'm still got to go over how to put the stuff in the game and just other things like that. So which I'll go over afterwards. All right, so one of the mods I made allowed me to put enchanting on other stuff, which is another part of something that I'm going to go over as well. But I wanted to first give you a heads up of what I'll be going over next. And so what you have now is the baseline of how things work with all of this. Now, daggers and weapons in the game are not actually attached to anything until you actually attach them to something. You can use the same thing over and over and over again. That's why you pick up arrows. They don't really have a connection to them. Now, if you wanted to make very specific arrows, that would be different. All right, so okay, so what you have here is we're going to put this book in the game. So what I'm going to do is I have to zoom out, and I'm going to put this in a very specific place. I'm going to use the forge. I got to find out where it is. I think it's at the beginning. I got to go to the beginning of where the entrance of it is. There it is. All right, so oops, that was not good. I gotta type in bench. I gotta find this. Let me see, bench. Have to go to Whiterun World and go to bench. Nope. Alright, so anyway, let me, I gotta find this here. Whiterun World. It is... Origin, Plains District. I'm gonna reload this, and I'm going to go to bench. I think it's workbench, I'm not sure. Bench. Nope. Work. I have no idea what that is, so I'm just going to type in barrel. Actually, I'm going to click on one of these barrels. It's a lot easier. You have to kind of like look around in the creation kit, like where you want to find something, to know where something is, because you'd have to know the name of it. So let me type in barrel up here. All right, so let's double click this, and I'll go here. Okay, so I usually use a reference point. That's something that's really easy to do, and so I'm going to press M to shut off the markers. Okay, so I'm looking for the very beginning of the entrance to it, so I can use this to show how to put a book in. Give you an example on how to put a book in. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to use this workbench right here to put this book in. Okay, so now, remember I told you it's easier to click on something so you know. Okay, so now what you're going to do is you're going to put, I'm going to show you how to actually insert an item from the creation kit into the game itself. So we're going to take the book, the spell tome I just made. Type O1, make sure all, so I can go at the top. It's going to take a second for the list to show up. It's under magic, so let me see here. O1. Okay, so this is all the O1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the summon tome, and what you're going to do is you're going to take it and drag it onto the onto this. See, hold on a second. Let me Okay, so what you basically have done is you've taken the spell tome itself and dragged it into the creation kit. So now you use everything that I explained to you at the beginning on how to edit this and stuff like and put this in. Okay, so what you're going to do now is there's a hotkey. It's F that allows you to put it level with something. So that's a little off, so you need to raise it up a little bit. Now, when you want to change a direction or anything, there's a couple ways you can do it. I saved this hotkey for now to show you because it would have been overwhelming at the beginning. So what I'm going to do is you take your book, right? Again, you want to make sure that you're right on it. Okay, so and then you want to raise it up. So if you hold down Z, it'll raise it up. If you hold down C, it'll turn it. And I think X does something. Yeah, okay, X turns it. X does this. So if you hold X and then you move the mouse left and right, it'll do that. If you hold Z, it lifts it up and down if you move the mouse back and forth. Then if you hold C, it'll rotate it forward and back. But that's with the left mouse button. If you use the right mouse button and hold it, it'll rotate it in a different angle. So